Margot. This past week, I experienced something that perhaps some of you have encountered. In fact, maybe even encountered this past week. And to set the stage for you, like so many others, Christmas shopping has really changed for us over time, so that pretty much if I can't get it from Amazon now, I'll think of something else to give somebody. And so there's so much that you buy for people that you're getting gifts for at Christmas time where you're ordering it. And so since Thanksgiving, though, there have been just a steady stream of deliveries coming from Amazon and UPS and the post office as various gifts come in. And most of the time what would happen, though, is that I would have them delivered to the house. And once they come, I would just open it, peek inside, and then I would put it in the car and I would bring it to the church because that's where I had all my Christmas presents. And so anyway, for weeks I have been accumulating a stash of Christmas presents, and this past week it was time to get them out so that they could actually get wrapped and could be presented to people on Christmas. And in the process, getting all of these things out and then getting them wrapped, I've discovered something. I'm missing something. I have bought something, I have ordered something, and I'm certain that it showed up, but it's not here. And so I searched everywhere. I searched my hiding place here at the church repeatedly. I searched my office, I searched the trunk, I searched all our vehicles, I looked in my closet, I looked any place that I thought this thing could have been, and I'm running out of time because I think it was Wednesday at this point. And so I can't find it. I tell Caroline I can't find this thing, and so I go online to try to order another one, thinking I can get it here by Friday. And I don't know if you tried to do that this past week on Amazon, but if you did, you're probably disappointed because they said, yeah, you can get one. It'll be here next Wednesday. Well, that's too late. Long story short, we finally found it. It was actually at the house. We finally found it. But I decided, based on that experience, I'm going to do some things different going forward. About 2 weeks before Christmas next year, I'm going to double check to make sure that I've got everything. In fact, put another way, I'm going to make sure that I take inventory to make sure that I have what I think that I have. You know, we do, and we use the word inventory regularly, don't we? I mean, stores take inventory. Warehouses take inventory. Even in your home, probably this past week you took inventory of spices, maybe because there was some dish that you were cooking for Christmas lunch that you wanted to make sure that you had everything there in the house. If you're like us, regularly you take inventory with the kids when you're out. You're like, 1, 2, 3, yeah, I make sure I've got everybody. We're doing inventory all the time. And what I want you to think about with me on this last Sunday of 2021 is this: the experience of being a follower of Jesus, taking a spiritual inventory. Spiritual inventory. Now, you might have been counting gifts, and you might have been counting sheep, you might have been counting children, spices, items on the shelf, you've been counting all sorts of things. But from a spiritual perspective, in terms of your relationship with the Lord, let me just be very plain in saying there is significant benefit in taking a spiritual inventory. That's the question we want to think about today. What's the benefit of that? I mean, for me to kind of examine where things are with me in my walk with the Lord, what's the benefit of a spiritual inventory? Look with me to everyone's favorite book of the Bible today, to Numbers chapter 26. If you would look with me there in your Bibles, and just a couple of portions in this chapter, I believe that God answers that question for us. What's the benefit of a spiritual inventory? In verse 1, we're told, after the plague, the Lord said to Moses and Eleazar, son of Aaron the priest, take a census of the entire Israelite community by their ancestral families, of those 20 years old or more who can serve in Israel's army. Look down towards the end of the chapter, down to verse 63. There we're told, these were the ones registered by Moses and the priest Eleazar when they registered the Israelites on the plains of Moab by Jordan across from Jericho. But among them there was not one of those who had been registered by Moses and the priest when they registered the Israelites in the wilderness of Sinai. For the Lord had said to them that they would all die in the wilderness. none of them was left except Caleb, son of Jephunneh, and Joshua, son of Nun. You say, well, that's a riveting passage. What does that have to do with anything? Well, I think what it does is that it helps answer that question for us. For me, as a follower of God, what is the benefit, especially we're at the cusp of a new year, at the ending of a year. It's a great time to press the pause button, to do some evaluation, and as a follower of Christ, to take a spiritual inventory. But what's the benefit of doing something like that? Based on what we see here, I think there's a few answers, and the first is this. By taking a spiritual inventory, God can show us where we are. God can show us where we are. Now, so that we can get our minds in sync as to what's going on here, I know Numbers is not people's typically their favorite book of the Bible because, for one thing, there's a whole stack of numbers in this book. There's a whole lot of counting that's going on. And a lot of times we just kind of cruise through this book, but there's some important stuff that's found here. In fact, sometimes some important stuff in some what may seem to be otherwise trivial details. But in terms of context, hopefully you can remember some of the things that have been going on. You remember that the children of Israel had been slaves in Egypt for 400 years. God raises up Moses, and through you remember the plagues where God was trying to get the attention of Pharaoh. Finally, the children of Israel are released. Moses is leading them out of Israel, and where are they headed? They're headed to the Promised Land. Why do they call it the Promised Land? Because this is the land that God promised He was going to give them. Where exactly is it? How did they get there? They didn't really know, and so God supernaturally guided them. During the day, there was a cloud that would go before them, so they could follow that cloud. Even if they were to travel at night, there was some sort of pillar of fire, some light that would illuminate in the evening so that they might be able to travel in the cool of the day as God was guiding them to this land. Finally, they get on the outskirts of the Promised Land, and maybe you remember what happens. Moses leads the children of Israel to do something fairly smart, which is, hey, we ought to send some spies in to check out and scope out the place to make sure that we know what we're getting ready to experience. And so he sends 12 spies into the land because the land is not empty. It's not just sitting there vacant. This is a populated area. These are cities and towns and villages that already have people in them. And so what happens is that these 12 spies come back, and 10 of them are unanimous in their description. They said, holy cow, these people are just giants. I mean, compared to them, we're like grasshoppers. And if we try to go in and fight them, it's going to be an absolute slaughter. We're going to be slaughtered. There's no way that we can take this, at least now. We just can't. This is an impossible task, this thought of going in and taking this land. And so 10 of them are unanimous in saying that. But there's 2, Joshua and Caleb, who said, their description is correct. These people are big, and there's a stack of them. And we don't have a whole lot going for us. We don't have standing armies and lots of armament and weaponry. We don't have all that. But what we do have is this. We have God on our side, and He said He was going to give us this. And so if we'll lean on Him and just follow Him, somehow, some way, we believe that God is going to give us this land. And so what did the people do? Well, they believed that God operates always by a majority rule. Well, so 10-2, okay, God must be in the majority, but He wasn't, because the majority was a lack of faith. The majority was a lack of trust. The majority said, we can't really take God at His word. And so because of that, because they did not follow the advice and the counsel of Joshua and Caleb, there was a punishment, and the punishment was severe. God said, none of you aged 20 and above will ever see the Promised Land. And the none of you is not to the 10 or to these 10 spies, it's to the nation of Israel. There is not a person who was living that day that would ever, if they were 20 or above, that would ever step foot into the Promised Land except for Joshua and Caleb and their families. And so what would happen is that over the next 40 years, that's the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. They're just out there essentially as nomads. And during this time, God keeps His word, and these individuals have died. When we get here to chapter 26, the 40-year time frame is almost over. And so what God does is that He tells Moses and Eleazar. Eleazar is Aaron's son. Aaron has been the high priest. And the instruction is this: take a census of the entire Israelite community by their ancestral families of those 20 years old or more who can serve in Israel's army. Two things I want you to note. First of all, a census was taken when the wilderness experience began, so they knew how many they had. Now they're getting ready to go and take the promised land, and God tells them, press the pause button, stop and count. We need to conduct a census. Well, you get some detail here, though, too. Take a census of those that are 20 years or more who what? Who can serve in Israel's army. Again, the promised land is not vacant. They're going to have to go in and conquer it. They're going to have to go in and take this land. And for them to begin to act, they need to know, hey, this is where we are. This is what we have to work with. We're not going to operate based on assumptions. We're going to operate based on how things actually are. And before we can begin to act, we need to know how things actually are. And so God leads them to conduct a census. And what is a census? A census is an inventory. In this case, it's an inventory of people. And by application, I believe there's some important application for us, and that is that there is benefit for us as a follower of God to press the pause button and take an inventory. I don't mean count the people in your family, but to count what's going on, take a census, take an inventory of what's going on in your life. From a spiritual perspective, from how God may view what's going on in your life. It doesn't make any difference how you compare to society and culture and your neighbors, but when I look at my checkbook and I see how money comes in and how money goes out, how does God look at this? Am I being a good steward of this? I've got this watch on that marks time, but the time that God gives me and has been giving me, have I been using that or have I been wasting that? The relationships that God gives me, whether they're close friends or they are just co-workers that I'm able to have conversation with in the break room at lunch, what am I doing with those opportunities? In the end, I believe we all, as followers of Christ, do well, especially at this time of year. When we've got an opportunity and around us, we're surrounded by people that are doing the same thing, maybe not as followers of Christ, but just pausing and evaluating, saying, hey, this is where I am. And as a follower of His, I really believe if you say, Lord, I want you to help me see myself as I am. I want you to help me to see my circumstances as they are. God will show you where you actually are. You say, well, what's the big deal with that? Why does that matter? This is why I think it matters. I know that something like this has happened to me repeatedly, and I don't know if it's happened to you, but regularly I find myself, I'm looking for some sort of product. And I feel like it's happened like at Home Depot and Lowe's, but especially Home Depot more than anywhere else. There's something that I'm looking for. I need to fix something. I need something. And so I go online and I look and I see that Home Depot shows that it has it. In fact, if you do this, you go on the website, for example, if the Bridgeford Parkway store, if you have that one selected, it'll tell you the aisle number and the bay and the bin where that particular product is supposed to be. Beyond that, it'll tell you how many of them that they have. That's excellent. So I need a double light switch. Well, that's on aisle 35, bay 2, section 6, whatever. We have 27 of those in stock. And so that's nice. You can go and you can pick those up right now and you know exactly where they are. But this has happened to me repeatedly where I will see, oh, they have 2 in stock. And so I go, and I may even have my phone with me. I'm on aisle 36, bay 2, aisle whatever. Well, and there's nothing there except a blank spot. And if you can find an employee, I jest. Anyway, so you find an employee and you say, hey, can you help me with this? It says that you've got 2 of these light switches, but I can't find any. Invariably, what I'll hear them say is something like this: you just can't trust that. I mean, if it says we've got 10, you might find some, but if it says that we've got 1 or 2, you can just bank on the fact that it's probably not here, that they're already gone. So what this says you have, you don't actually have. Yeah, no, that thing's always wrong. Well, that's aggravating. It's aggravating as a customer. Again, you might have experienced something like this. But I say all of that to say this. It matters and is of consequence that what you think you have, you actually have. And in terms of the living of your life as a man, as a woman, as a husband, as a wife, as a father, as a mother, as a grandparent, as an employee, as a Sunday school teacher, as a preacher, as someone that is a follower of Christ, you need to know where you actually are and what you think you have and how things actually are. You need to know how that is. Because if you just think that everything is okay, unfortunately, what you'll discover many times is that it's not the case. You and I need God's help, and we need the benefit of pressing the pause button and say, Lord, will you help me see where I am with you, with my walk with you, with all the responsibilities and opportunities you've entrusted to my care? Where am I in all of this? And I promise you, I believe if you do that, that's a prayer that God is honored by. That's a desire that He is pleased by, and I really believe you will experience this. He will show you exactly where you are. But there's another benefit from all this, and that is that God can show you what you've missed. God can show you what you've missed. Again, if you were to thumb through or just glance through Numbers 26, you're going to see all of these different families, all of these different clans, and it's going to describe their number. Also, there are 43,730 from the Reubenites, and there's all of these. And again, you just go through here and your eyes may glaze over. You think, well, none of this is important. And you get to verse 63, and you say, hey, or you get the summary statement that tells us these were the ones registered by Moses and Eleazar when they registered the Israelites on the plains of Moab by the Jordan across from Jericho. I mean, just on the outskirts of the Promised Land. So that statement just simply says, hey, here's the totals. Verse 64, though, is very, very, very important. Look at it. Among them, there was not one of those who had been registered by Moses and the priest Aaron when they registered the Israelites in the wilderness of Sinai. A few moments ago, I said this is not the first census. This is actually the second one. And again, they're getting ready to go in the Promised Land. There's a lot that needs to be done. There's strategy and there is alignment of resources and personnel and all this stuff that needs to go on. And it seems kind of like a waste of time to say we need to stop everything and count everybody. But God told them to do this. This is not the first time. He told them before. And He told them before at the beginning of that wilderness experience. So they kept the sheet of paper. They've got two totals. Again, verse 63 says, okay, here's the totals. This is everyone that was counted by Moses and his nephew Eleazar. Big deal. Think with me about this, though, because there's that important detail. The important detail is in verse 64, that among those that were counted, there were none over age 20 that are still around that were counted the first time. Now, this passage doesn't tell us, but I want you just to kind of think with me in your mind what it would have been like for Moses to look at that accounting, for him to look at that inventory report. What would his response have been? What about, well, that's a nice number? I just really, really think that when he looked at that number, there was a stunned silence. Maybe a deep gulp. Because all of a sudden, it became very clear just how many people were gone. I've got to think for 40 years, Moses has been thinking, man, there's sure a lot of funerals going on. Haynes Lineberry is doing really good lately. Man, the cemetery is just it's gangbuster business. But finally, seeing this number, Moses realizes none of those people, none of them is still here. All of those generations of people, those tens of thousands, those hundreds and hundreds of thousands, they're all gone. I believe it was important for Moses. I believe it was important for the people as they took this inventory, as they conducted this census. One of the benefits, I believe, was that God showed them exactly now what they have missed. And there's benefit in that. How does that work? I don't know about you. I like chicken wings. That's a hard transition right there, but I like chicken wings. And in our family, most everybody likes some chicken wings. And I would say among our kids, though, Philip is the one that probably likes chicken wings the most. And a couple of years ago, I had taken a couple of the boys. I had to go to a funeral in Harrisburg, and there was a place over in Concord that once a month has all-you-can-eat wing night. I won't bore you with the details, but they have this wing buffet the first Monday night of the month. It's called Christo's in Concord. You can go there. Anyway, for $10, it's all-you-can-eat wings, pizza, homemade banana pudding, homemade homemade ranch and blue cheese dressing. It's great. It's indigestion like immediately. And so I've taken the boys there, and Philip is loving life. And he's probably like 10 at this point. And it's not just simply in his mind, I think, that it's a treat to be able to have all these wings. All of a sudden, it's like it's a contest. It's not just that you can eat as many as you want. It's like, how many can I eat? And so all of a sudden, he's like, man, I've eaten 27 wings. I think he said he finished that night with 29, something like that. And let's be honest, a 10-year-old really can't eat 29 wings. That's a lot of chicken wings. That's an awful lot of chicken wings. And so, but he was saying, man, I've eaten 29 of these things. And I said, well, look at the plate, though. And you see all these bones there, and man, there's a lot on them bones. And I was like, Philip, I think all you've kind of done is just like suck the sauce off of 29 wings. There's a lot of meat still there. And at this point, though, if Philip has wings, Philip can't eat 29 wings now. He can't. Because I think that experience was instructive and helpful, because it helped him to realize all of this that was still left there, all of this that was still on the bone, all of this that was wasted. It was wasted. I don't mean to be excessively negative at all, but I think we need to be reminded of this because it's true of all of us. We learn as people in the presence of cost and difficulty and adversity in ways that we don't learn otherwise. I wish it were different, but it's not. We learn when we see that there is pain. We learn from adverse consequences. We just do. And I really believe that there is benefit in a spiritual inventory, especially here at the end of a year, to say, God, help me to see not just where I am, but help me to see what I've missed. Help me to see all of the meat that's still on the bones, all of this that's been wasted. And it's entirely possible that there may be a clarion moment, perhaps as there was for Moses, where you just kind of take a deep breath and a big gulp. Say, wow, man, look at what that cost me. Look at what that cost us. What's the benefit of that? Hopefully, then you learn from that experience, from that realization of cost, that going forward, I'm not doing that anymore. Listen, there is great spiritual benefit that comes and great benefit in life as a follower of Christ from asking the Lord to help you to do a spiritual inventory. He'll show you where you are. He can show you what you've missed, but there's a final thing, and that's this. He can show you what you can experience. He can show you what you can experience. Verse 65 effectively functions as a close to a parenthetical thought. It says, the Lord had said to them that they would all die in the wilderness. Now, this is not a happily ever after, is it? And God bless us, everyone. God said they would all die in the wilderness. It sounds really negative, doesn't it? And in truth, this statement does come across as an excessively negative, painful reality. But in this statement, I believe there is great promise because there is a truth that is underscoring or is underlined by that reality. And that's this. God said all of these people would die, and all of these people died. Well, that sounds really negative, but behind that negative thought is this: God keeps His word. God keeps His word. When God says that things are going to happen, things happen. When God says that things will not happen, when God says that doors will close, doors will close. And one of the great benefits of asking the Lord and allowing the Lord to lead us through a spiritual inventory is that it helps us see God kept His word to Moses, but God kept His word to me. He told me if, then, and that was the case. God showed me if I didn't, I couldn't. God showed me if I wouldn't, I wouldn't. God showed me this. And the inventory allows me to see and fleshes out in very clear detail God keeps His word so that I can know what He says I will experience, I actually will experience. Daniel Towner was for D.L. Moody leading music one night. D.L. Moody, hopefully, is a name you're familiar with. In the mid to late 1800s, a particularly prominent evangelist. And Towner was leading music for D.L. Moody one night. And after the service, he was talking to a young man, and he said, what do you think you're going to do? And the young man said, I don't know, but I think I'm just going to trust and obey. Towner recounted that in a letter that he wrote to a minister friend of his. And some weeks later, he received another letter from this minister in return in the mail, and that statement struck him. And it was then that he wrote these words: when we walk with the Lord in the light of His word, what a glory He sheds on our way. While we do His good will, He abides with us still, and with all who will trust and obey. Discovering that God keeps His word, knowing that He can then show me what I can experience when I trust and obey. Listen, you've been counting all sorts of things. You've been counting who's been naughty and nice. You've been counting spices. You've been counting presents. You've been counting stuff in the stores. You've been counting stuff in warehouses. You've been counting everywhere. Let me encourage you on this last week of 2021. Make the decision today to begin the process of saying, Lord, show me where I am. Will you bow your heads with me?